Hey there, Coach Nikki. Winning in marriage after infidelity. Today we're dealing with the healing process. And so there are just a couple things, I don't keep you on here long. There are just a couple things that, I want to talk about that will help the healing process. Number one, like I've said in the other sessions, the most important thing with the healing process, if you are going to um, continue with your marriage, is the spouse who betrayed the marriage has to be 100% in. They have to understand that they need to do whatever needs to be done in order to make this marriage work and put this help to put this marriage back together. And so, the first thing we're going to talk about today is redefining friendships of the opposite sex. So, if you, as the spouse, or you, period, in the marriage, have friendships with the opposite sex, um, in order to get those, in order to build a new relationship and start trust again, you're probably going to have to put those relationships to the side or maybe even away forever. Um, if you have a friend of the opposite sex and that friend is not wanting or willing to be friends with both you and your spouse, that's not a friendship you want to have in the first place. But while you guys are putting things together and getting your marriage back together, you need to put those friends of the opposite sex to the side. It's nothing but a distraction. People, when you have friendships, they usually have opinions, especially people who are single. They, for some reason, have um, so many things to say to people who are married. I don't know where they get all their knowledge from, and you've never been married. But anyway, those are relationships that you need to put to the side. Your spouse does not need to have anything else that they need to think about that could possibly cause your relationship to go left. And believe you me, when you've been betrayed in a relationship, one of your biggest fights is the battle of your mind. You have to control your mind. And so you don't want to give your spouse anything else to have to think about, imagine, cast down, any of that. We got enough to deal with what's going on already. So you want to rethink relationships of the opposite sex. And I would say that for both spouses at this time, because when you're hurt, you're vulnerable, you will listen to certain things that people say. Will you act on all of them? No. But you still don't want to have to do that extra work with, like I said, thoughts in your mind. So, number two, you want to control and maybe calm down how often you spend time with single friends. Not saying that you should not have single friends. I'm just saying that you should kind of calm down how often you spend time with your single friends. Because we all know that single people don't operate like married people operate. And so, a lot of times we indirectly, yeah, those glasses were killing me. Can't see my eyes, I don't like that. Um, a lot of times we indirectly have things in our mind about, how single people are free to go and come as they want. They don't have to talk to anybody about anything. They don't have to come in at a certain time. They don't have to go at a certain time. They don't have to do anything. It's just them on their own. And so some people are caught up with free, how free single people look and how their lifestyle is so free and and even have thoughts about what if my life was that free? I remember being that free. I remember not having to call anybody and say where I was at, or I remember not having to cut my social life short or anything. And so when you spend most of your time with people who are single, you tend to want to do what single people do. And so that in itself is a problem for you and your spouse. So for the healing process, the spouse that has been hurt, what I suggest that you do is you sit down and you think long and hard about what would make you feel better. What is going to make you be on the road to feeling secure in the relationship. Now, spouse who has been hurt, please understand that you cannot make unrealistic demands on the spouse who has cheated. Because what we're doing is we're gaining trust. So if you demand that your spouse sits there at home with you as long as you're home, if you're home all day or when you get off from work and you just, that's not realistic. People have lives. There are things that need to be done. There are errands that need to be run. There are side jobs and part-time jobs and picking up kids and working out and different things like that. That sometimes you're going to have to understand that you're going to have to get to a point where, number one, I trust God. My spouse says to me that they are serious about making this relationship work. And so that's where my trust starts. I'm going to have to trust the God in my spouse that we have gone through a traumatic situation and they're learning from it and I'm learning from it. And you're going to have to give that spouse a chance to prove themselves in trying to fix it and make it better. So while I believe that it's great for my husband and I to go to the gym together, I don't necessarily like going to the gym, but when I go, I like to go with him. I don't believe that every single time that he goes to the gym, that I need to be right there to make sure that he's not doing something he's not supposed to. Number one, what that tells you, if you have to do that, then that person is not really willing to fix the relationship. We're working on moving towards a relationship that we don't have to babysit. And so then that means that the spouse who is cheated has to mature and grow up in some things. And just like your children, you have to trust that they have learned what they need to learn in your house, and you send them out on their way, and hopefully everything that they've learned they use when they're away from you. And the same thing goes for your spouse. I took the time in the healing process to really ask myself who I was as a woman, as a person, because nobody told me that a lot of the things that we were going through had to do with some identity issues that my husband had. And so I was taking on some of the issues that he had that weren't necessarily mine. And so I'm thinking to myself, you hear people say, well, if he or she would have been doing what they should have been doing at home, then their spouse wouldn't have stepped out. That has absolutely nothing to do with nothing. Do you see my face? Nothing to do with anything. People make conscious decisions to do certain things that they do. Most people who step out, they usually have a spouse who takes care of business. It's just their own identity that they're dealing with that causes them to step out. A lot of times for men, men are one way, and depending on what type of man we're dealing with, not everybody's the same, but my husband is a people person. He's a street guy. And so he's a different person in the street than he is here at the house, here at home. And so in the street, he's one guy, and he's that fun-loving, excuse me, life of the party guy in the streets. But when he comes home, he's a husband, and he's a great father, and he's, I guess you would say, the life of the party here at home. So he had to get to a place where he could be one person and not two people. And when you're dealing with two different people, or I don't want to say two different people, two different thought processes or two different identities, that sounds horrible, doesn't it? Sounds like somebody's crazy. But when you're dealing with two different identities, almost we're saying an alter ego, then at a certain point in your life, you have to deal with that alter ego. That alter ego has to go somewhere. You can't continue to live with an alter ego. So you need to figure out which direction you're going. And a lot of times, you have a lot to lose when you don't choose well. And so the spouse who has been hurt has to understand what it is they're dealing with their spouse, and they have to be willing to help and be patient in helping that spouse figure out who they are. And sometimes you know, you might have to voice what it is that you like about your spouse. Not the person they are when they're when they're somewhere else, who they are at home. So you might have to do things like reassure them that you really appreciate how they take care of the house. You really appreciate how they cut the grass or how they wash the dishes or how she makes sure that all the bills are taken care of or takes care of the kids. Some people think that's just too much and I shouldn't have to do that. Well, yes, maybe you shouldn't for someone like you who has their identity intact. But we do that on our jobs. We do that to get promotions, or we do that to have somebody help us in the supermarket, or at the shopping center, or wherever. So if you can do it for people at church or wherever, then you surely can do it for your spouse. And if it's going to save your marriage, for me, everything short of doing something illegal, this is the ministry that God has given to me, and I will not fail. Period. I'm just not. I've been married 20 years, been with my husband for 25 years. I've put a lot of work into that man. And I will be doggone if I'm going to put all the work that I've put into the man that I have, all to send him out to be a good man for somebody else. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And with God's help, it's not going to happen. So there are just certain things that we all have to do in our marriage. And sometimes, society has made us feel like, oh, well, I ain't doing that. I'm not bending over backwards for nobody. That's what I'm not going to do. It's a ministry. You two are one. So when you give up on your spouse, you give up on yourself. Period. No, I'm not saying that you're the type of person that if your spouse just continues to cheat and cheat and cheat and cheat and cheat, you're supposed to just keep talking about this, let's stay together, because that's not happening either. But what I am saying is, understand where things come from. The enemy works on a regular basis. So we fight not against flesh and blood, but principalities. So your understand your assignment in the marriage. If you are the one that needs to be more mindful or more spiritual at this season in your marriage, so be it. It's not a matter of being the weak one. You're not weak. You're the stronger one, because you're the one who says, we've got a lot to lose. We've put 25 years into what we have going on. And I'd be doggone if one weekend or one little person that don't nobody care about one way or the other is going to swoop through and take away everything that we've built. Not going to happen. That's when you lose. When you start thinking about, oh, my pride, and I can't put my pride aside, and I can't do. Do you know how silly that I have looked to some people that have talked about, oh my goodness, she's so stupid and she's this and I wouldn't do this and I wouldn't do that, and they went through something in their marriage and got divorced, and you talk to them later on and they say, I really wish that I could have been in a place spiritually where I could have moved forward in my marriage and kept going. Now, I'm not saying that's for everybody, and I'm not knocking people who decide to move on. That's not what I'm saying. But at the same time, understand that when you move on, you got to start over. You got to start over, and you got to start building things and putting things together. And who's to say that you won't get with a person who still has identity issues? Hopefully God will bless you with somebody who is a 1 Timothy man or a Proverbs 31 woman that you can just step right in and move forward. But a lot of things, anything worth having is worth working for. And so I just say that to say, try your hardest, work your hardest, and don't look at what it is that your spouse is doing right now. People used to tell me, pray about it. And I used to think to myself, pray about it, and I believe that prayer works, but I'm tired of praying. I'm tired of praying about the same stuff. It just means you need to pass your test. God is doing something in you, and He's allowing your prayer life to go to another level. So, In the healing process, like I said, both partners need to be 100% in. The spouse who has betrayed the marriage has to be there and understand that they need to have all the patience in the world. They need to give all the hugs and all the love and all the support that they can possibly give. And the spouse who is hurt has to be open to allow that spouse to come in and help them to heal. The healing process belongs to the two of you, not just one person, not going out talking to somebody else. Now, there's nothing wrong with going to counseling and talking to your pastor, but the work has to be done by the two of you. And so you're going to have to carve out time, both spouses, to just spend time together. Maybe it's a point of you two needing to get to know each other, because we all grow. None of us stay in the same place. And maybe you guys have grown apart. That doesn't mean that you move apart. That means you just figure out how to mature together. You know, be creative in what is going on in your relationship. You need to sit down and write those things out so you can go back to what it is that you talked about. And especially if you have children that are small, that takes up a lot of your time. But you're going to have to figure out some time to carve out some time for you two only. Because number one, you're going through something that was traumatic in your relationship. And so you have to sow into that relationship and put some time in to making it better. I suggest that everybody writes their goals down at the first of the year, both husband and wife. You write your goals down and then you make goals together. And you do it like a quarterly thing, just like you have a business or a corporation. Every quarter, you revisit those goals and check off the things that you have accomplished and the things that you still have to go forward with. Then you write down strategies to move together to make those things happen. The more time that you spend with each other, the better off your relationship is. People will say, well, I need a breather. Yeah, you do need a breather. But understand, you said for better or for worse, in sickness and in health and whatever else it says. But I'm saying that to say, you made a commitment, you made a covenant before God that you two are going to become one. And so when you become one with something, then you understand that a lot of your time is spent with that person that you became one with, because you're one. That's what it means. And so my suggestion is to spend time. People take date nights for granted, and when things come up, they always say, oh, we can go, we can do it next week, or we can. That's something that you do not take for granted. Date night is every week. I don't care what goes on. You might have to switch a day, but date night will be every week. And date night is a night that's just for my spouse and I. Whatever it is we like to do, how silly or how formal or whatever it is that we like to do, it's going to be date night. And ladies, one thing I want to say to you, don't be so close-minded where date night is concerned. Yeah, you pick date night sometime to go somewhere that you like to go to, but then sometime let him pick and be a part of it. Put yourself out there to have fun. It might not be something that you would normally do, but who's to say if you don't do it that you won't have fun? And if you're trying to make your spouse happy, you just do it because it makes your spouse happy, and vice versa. Men, don't be so controlling that there are just certain things that you don't want to try. You don't know you don't like it because you haven't tried it. And you just want to do it because you want to make your spouse happy. The goal is to have a good relationship. And in having a good relationship and being one with somebody is, swallowing your pride or taking yourself out of it, because I believe that we're judged on how we treat people, not how people treat us. And so I honestly believe if you put your whole heart into something and you pray and ask God to bless it, I believe He blesses it by what you put into it. And so with that being said, we're going to end it for today. If you have any questions, You can inbox me on Facebook at Lifestyle Upgrade Coaching. You can go to YouTube, Coach Nikki, and put your questions and your comments there. And until next week, let's stay together, the movement.